The studio is quiet as the story unfolds, centered on a teenage girl whose first experience with love arrived too early and burned too deeply, leaving marks she did not know how to name. She speaks about how innocent conversations turned into intense emotional dependence, how messages at midnight felt like oxygen, and how silence felt like punishment. Her words reveal confusion, fear, and a longing to feel chosen, explaining how teenage brains crave connection while lacking the tools to protect themselves. She describes skipping school, hiding her phone, lying to her parents, and believing that pain was proof of love. Each sentence reflects how fast emotions can grow at a young age and how trauma often disguises itself as romance, especially when validation feels rare and attention feels like safety. The boy involved tells his side with shaky confidence, admitting that he never intended to hurt anyone, but also never understood the weight of his actions. He talks about jealousy, control, and the thrill of being needed, confessing that he confused possession with care. As he speaks, it becomes clear that he too learned love from broken examples, from arguments at home and affection that came with conditions. The conversation exposes how two teenagers, both emotionally unprepared, collided in a relationship that escalated faster than maturity could follow. What began as affection slowly transformed into manipulation, emotional withdrawal, and cycles of apology that felt endless. The parents listen in disbelief, realizing that while they were focused on grades and future plans, an emotional crisis was growing silently in their own home. The mother describes sleepless nights once she discovered the messages, feeling guilt for not noticing the signs sooner. The father struggles with anger, not only toward the boy, but toward himself for assuming his child was safe simply because she was at home. Their reflections highlight a painful truth. Trauma does not always come from strangers, and danger is not always loud. Sometimes it grows quietly behind locked screens and whispered promises. As the discussion deepens, the impact of social media emerges as a powerful force amplifying teenage love trauma. Constant access, public validation, and the pressure to present a perfect relationship created unrealistic expectations and relentless comparison. The girl explains how seeing other couples online made her feel inadequate, pushing her to tolerate emotional pain just to avoid being alone. The relationship became a performance where happiness was posted and suffering was hidden. This digital pressure blurred boundaries, making it harder to step away even when the relationship became harmful. Emotional manipulation becomes a central theme as examples are shared of guilt, silent treatment, and threats of self-harm used to maintain control. The girl admits she stayed because she was afraid that leaving would destroy him, believing his well-being was her responsibility. This moment reveals how deeply teenagers can internalize blame, especially when love is tied to fear. The conversation sheds light on how trauma bonds form, trapping young people in cycles of anxiety and relief that feel impossible to escape. The boy begins to recognize patterns in his behavior, acknowledging that control made him feel powerful during moments of insecurity. He speaks about not knowing how to communicate fear or vulnerability, choosing instead to dominate emotionally. This honesty opens a wider discussion about how boys are often taught to suppress emotions, leaving them ill-equipped to handle intense feelings. The story illustrates that unresolved emotional pain can manifest as harmful behavior, especially when guidance and accountability are absent. Attention turns to the long-term effects of teenage love trauma, including anxiety, trust issues, and distorted views of self-worth. The girl explains how even after the relationship ended, she struggled to feel normal, jumping at notifications and questioning her value. She describes nightmares, panic attacks, and a lingering fear of intimacy. These experiences underline how early emotional wounds can shape adult relationships if left unaddressed, making healing not just necessary but urgent. The parents confront their own communication gaps, admitting that rules were enforced without conversation and trust was assumed rather than built. They recognize that fear-based parenting created secrecy, making it harder for their child to ask for help. This realization shifts the focus toward creating safe emotional spaces at home, where teenagers can talk openly without fear of punishment. The discussion emphasizes that prevention begins with listening, not control. Education becomes a key solution as the conversation explores how schools rarely teach emotional literacy, consent, or healthy relationship skills. Teenagers are expected to navigate complex emotions with little guidance, learning instead from peers, media, and trial and error. The story argues that understanding boundaries, respect, and self-worth should be considered essential life skills, not optional lessons. Without them, young people are left vulnerable to repeating cycles of trauma. The healing process is addressed with honesty, acknowledging that recovery is not linear and often uncomfortable. Therapy, support groups, and honest conversations are presented as tools rather than signs of weakness. The girl shares small victories like reclaiming hobbies, rebuilding friendships, and learning to sit with silence without fear. These moments show that healing begins when identity is no longer tied to someone else's approval. Accountability plays a crucial role as the boy accepts responsibility for his actions without excuses. He acknowledges the harm caused and commits to seeking help, understanding that remorse alone is not enough. This moment reinforces the importance of consequences paired with growth, showing that change requires effort, reflection, and guidance. It also challenges the idea that youth excuses harmful behavior, emphasizing that learning responsibility early can prevent future harm. The conversation broadens to cultural expectations around teenage romance, questioning why intense relationships are often romanticized rather than examined. Movies, music, and peer pressure glorify obsession, jealousy, and sacrifice, sending confusing messages about what love should look like. The story encourages redefining love as something that brings peace, not fear, and growth, not control. This reframing is presented as essential for protecting young hearts. Trust rebuilding becomes a sensitive topic as the girl explains her struggle to believe in kindness without strings attached. She admits that even supportive gestures sometimes triggered suspicion, revealing how trauma reshapes perception. Through patience and consistent support, she slowly learns that healthy relationships do not demand pain as proof. This segment highlights the importance of time and compassion in recovery. The parents commit to change, promising to replace surveillance with conversation and authority with guidance. They acknowledge that their role is not to control choices, but to equip their child with tools to make safer ones. This shift represents a broader message about modern parenting in a digital world where connection matters more than control. Peer influence is examined as friends share how they noticed warning signs but did not know how to intervene. Fear of betrayal and social backlash kept them silent. This moment stresses the importance of empowering teens to speak up when they see harm, teaching them that caring sometimes means uncomfortable honesty. Supportive peer networks are framed as powerful protective factors. The story addresses forgiveness, clarifying that it does not mean forgetting or excusing harm. Instead, forgiveness is described as releasing self-blame and reclaiming personal power. The girl explains that forgiving herself was harder than forgiving anyone else, as she carried shame for staying too long. This insight underscores how self-compassion is often the final step in healing. Warning signs of unhealthy teenage relationships are clearly discussed, including isolation, excessive jealousy, fear of communication, and emotional volatility. The narrative encourages parents and teens alike to take these signs seriously rather than dismissing them as normal drama. Awareness is presented as the first line of defense against trauma. Hope emerges as the dominant theme as progress becomes visible through confidence, clarity, and restored self-worth. The girl speaks with strength, no longer defining herself by the past, but by the lessons learned. Her journey illustrates that trauma can inform growth without defining identity. This transformation offers reassurance to others facing similar pain. The conversation concludes with a reminder that teenage love, while intense, should never cost mental health, safety, or dignity. Young people deserve guidance, understanding, and protection as they navigate emotions for the first time. Adults are urged to remember their influence and responsibility in shaping how love is understood. The final message resonates as a call to action for families, schools, and communities to take teenage emotional experiences seriously. Love at a young age can be beautiful, but without education and support, it can also become traumatic. By fostering open dialogue, emotional literacy, and compassion, future generations can learn that love should heal, not hurt, and that growing up does not have to mean growing wounded.